Hello, hello, hello. Jordan Sheridan live. A little bit late. Sorry about that. Joined by Louis DeAngelis. Quite a lot going on in America. I don't even know. We can't get into all of it. Another mass shooting. Three kids dead, as well as three adults. A female shooter, which is, I guess, unusual. But that happened in Nashville, Tennessee. Unfortunately, there's not much to say that I haven't said already. We have a corrupt duopoly. Sure, you can blame the Republicans, but there are things that Biden can do uh, by executive action that he chooses not to. And it goes much further back than Biden to Obama and others. There was also a chemical spill in Philadelphia yesterday that we'll give a brief update on. In 24 hours, Philadelphia told folks, you got to drink bottled water and then you're fine. Right. It was like warp speed what happened in Philadelphia. So we'll get into that. More to talk about as far as East Palestine. I usually have the day count, but I've lost track. I think it's well over 50 days.
Yes.
Since this has happened. Lewis did some follow-up reporting on the Easter egg hunt that will now, unless something changes, happen in about 2 weeks. That independent experts and water testers and engineers who have been in East Palestine recently are now cautioning against the city allowing children to hunt for Easter eggs in a contaminated park that currently has what's in the park right now that they
I mean, you'd think that'd be common sense at this point that this isn't a great idea, but I mean, they're still aerating chemically polluted stream at the park entrance. It's caused enough concern that the city council has gone ahead to remove all of the wood chips from the playground and replace them with new ones after sanitizing everything. So there's definitely real concern about contamination in this park. At the entrance, there's active contamination and active cleanup at the park. So you'd think it'd be common sense to not welcome a bunch of children to go look for Easter eggs there. But I don't know what these folks are thinking anymore.
Yeah. So we're going to get into that. There's also, I would say, kind of breaking news. It's certainly not going to be covered on the mainstream media, but it's coming out now that there was EPA guidance. The EPA, likes to say guidance rather than law. Mm-hmm. EPA guidance. It's very complicated if you read the memo, but in a nutshell, there was EPA guidance from 2022, so last year, that basically spoke against doing a controlled burn like happened in East Palestine. So we are going to read a story we've invited the author on. I don't know if he's going to come on. He hasn't gotten back to me. But we're going to read it because it seems that whoever actually made the decision to do this uncontrolled burn did it against EPA guidelines. 2 + 2 = 4. We're all adults. Most of us are adults. We know it wasn't a small town fire chief who made the decision to do this. So it was either Norfolk Southern or the EPA or both, which we're going to show you against the EPA's old guidelines. So we'll get into that. Also, a little bit later, for those Status Coup OGers, you know that I've been following, in addition to Flint, a toxic air pollution story in God, it's all a blur. In Kalamazoo, Michigan. So we have new video from Kalamazoo, Michigan, which is going to show you that it's not just East Palestine that is literally pumping contaminants into the community. We have new videos showing people's eyes burning, their throat contracting from toxic gas that they have been releasing into East Palestine. Oh, I keep saying East Palestine. This is what happens when you have a 4.5-month-old, you have no sleep. Anyway, into Kalamazoo, that is literally not only making people sick, but I believe killing people, because the asthma and the respiratory infections in Kalamazoo, out of control. So we're going to have guests on that a little bit later. But let's start just to give you guys an update here on the Philadelphia chemical spill. I'm not going to go long on this, but if you were following, let's show the Aaron Brockovich tweet, which I think says it all. Aaron Brockovich tweeted, "Seriously, is anyone even surprised when this shit happens anymore? Is this going to be one more thing we all accept? Toxic water and bullshit all clear from the stay calm and carry on folks." Hashtag Philadelphia water. So what she's describing, and please smash that like button. We got 200 people watching already. Let's get every single person to press that like button. So the more people that press like, the more people that will see this. By the way, just saying, Lewis, we're literally 9, count them, 9 YouTube subscribers away from 142,000. So if you're an anti-social person who's been watching but refuses to subscribe, you could be one of 9 people that get us to 142,000 subscribers.
That should be easy right now for 9 of you to go and do that. Doesn't cost you any money. Go ahead, just press the button down there. We've got a lot of great content that we've already posted that you can go back and look at from East Palestine. Jordan's planning on going back to Flint soon. So if you're not subscribed already, easy way to help us out to get to that number.
Absolutely. So let's give you the brief. This is from the Washington Post. What's known about Philadelphia's drinking water after chemical spill. Of course, the corporate media is just going to regurgitate what the state water department had to say. A day after Philadelphia residents flocked to grocery stores to stock up on water bottles, city leaders worked to assure residents their tap water was safe on Monday, at least for now, even as questions lingered about the cause of a chemical spill in the Delaware River. By the way, if you live in the Northeast, the Delaware River serves 14 million people, their water. So not a small matter here, not to mention the wildlife, etc. Authorities were still assessing why a chemical plant late Friday spilled thousands of gallons of acrylic polymer into a tributary of the river, Philadelphia's main water supply. And this happened, by the way, a little northeast of Philadelphia. The spill prompted authorities to warn residents to avoid drinking tap water. Those advisories have since been lifted. Quote, there is no need to buy water at this time. Customers can fill bottles or pitchers with tap water with no risk at this time, the city said Sunday afternoon. So let's get this straight, folks. And even if you don't live in Philadelphia, listen up, because this is how fucked up the environmental authorities are in this country. Spill happens Friday night. How much spilled? 8,100 gallons of water-based latex finishing solution. The spill occurred because of a, quote, equipment failure, according to a statement from the company. By the way, I got to look into it more, but this plant has had problems in the past too. Shocker. So part of this spill, you got butyl acrylate, which also was part of the East Palestine spill. Butyl acrylate, a highly flammable chemical that can cause irritation after contact with skin or eyes, or cause respiratory problems if inhaled in large quantities. Also ethyl acrylate, found organically in pineapple, believe it or not. It's used to make paints and plastics. Acute exposure has been reported to cause drowsiness, nausea, headaches, and the EPA classifies it as a possible carcinogen. Carcinogens cause cancer. Is that correct, Lewis?
That is correct.
Correct. Methyl methacrylate, a reactive resin sometimes used as cement in dentistry, orthopedic surgery, and ophthalmology. It's not considered carcinogenic under normal use. Okay. On Saturday, Bucks County, which is Philadelphia, noted they were monitoring the Friday spill, said treated drinking water was not impacted. So they say. Spill reported to them by Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. By Sunday morning, claims the water is safe, yet says that people may opt to not drink it because it's not 100%.
It's not 100%, but don't worry about going and buying bottled water right now. We don't know for sure. We said maybe you need to worry about it before, but now we're saying maybe not so much. Like, you'd think that these experts, so-called experts, would understand that clarity in your message is like one of the most important things in here. These folks wonder why people don't trust the EPA now. I have a perfect
idea. And Aaron Brockovich said this in the past. Why don't you just say, we don't know.
Right.
We don't know yet.
Oh, that'd be Jordan. That'd be being honest. That'd be being honest. They don't want to do that.
Mother, how many times do I have to tell you I go live at 5 o'clock? I'll text you. I'm live right now. Anyway, so look at this mixed messaging. They're saying on Bucks County says drinking water not impacted. But then by the next morning, so not even 24 hours, they're saying the water is safe, yet you might want to go drink bottled water because we can't say for certainty that nothing's in there. Nonetheless, we cannot be 100% sure that there won't be traces of these chemicals in the tap water throughout the afternoon. We want the public to be aware so that people can consider switching to bottled water. I mean, bad pun, you're up Schitt's Creek at this point in the Delaware River, which, by the way, as a youth, I whitewater rafted with my father, brothers, and a couple friends. I'm not trying to scare you, but butyl acrylate, Lewis, you could tell folks what you know about it because you've been literally exposed a little bit. It's not like vinyl chloride deadly, but it's not the best thing to be
right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's certainly not like top of the list of concerning chemicals in East Palestine, but is a chemical that you do not want to be exposed to in any quantity, really, because even the short-term effects that you listed, some of them right there. But if you're exposed to this over a longer period of time, or you happen to be the one drinking the stuff and actually like ingesting it into your body, of course that's not going to be good for you, let alone the other chemicals mentioned that you said as well that are known to cause cancer, or even if there's a risk of it causing cancer. So again, the messaging on all of this, beyond like, just tell the truth. Like, if you don't know, like you said, say that you don't know. Rather be safe than sorry when you're talking about the drinking water supply for one of the largest cities in the United States. I mean, at least in this case, it was like it came out very quickly that it happened, and it was 24 hours, and they did this. In East Palestine, they still won't admit that the water is potentially questionable there, because it's a smaller, less wealthy town and whatnot here. But at least here there was some sort of alert. The fact that they're lying about it now, is ridiculous. You're saying, oh, you don't need to buy drinking bottled water at this point is it's still not good, but. If this were East Palestine, they'd probably still be telling these people, oh, everything's fine. There was never going to be a mention of bottled water or anything like that.
And also, this is from the Washington Post piece. Authorities were still assessing. Wait a minute. Oh, the water supply is safe to drink until at least 11:59 p.m. Monday, officials said, based on the time it takes water to move through treatment and water mains before reaching customers. But that may change as water tests continue. So wait a minute. It's safe till midnight, and after that...
Unless it might change. It's safe till midnight unless it might change.
But in fairness, this is kind of true because, as Aaron Brockovich and Bob Bocock have said, not just in East Palestine, but many places, just because there's not contamination at a specific time and day that you test doesn't mean as weather changes, as flow in streams and other places changes, that there's not some shaking around and there is contamination at a later time.
Right. That
could be literally hours from when you tested or the next day. So they kind of have it right that like, we could assure you until midnight. But then it's like, no, you can't assure us till midnight because you might have tested it. I'm assuming they don't stipulate. I hope, as Bob Bocock said, that they're testing it every hour. But it is the United States, and environmental departments aren't that exact. So they could have tested it. They said they were monitoring it on Saturday. So on Saturday, maybe the full contaminants weren't there yet. On Sunday, maybe it wasn't fully showing up yet. But as they're saying, we can kind of assure you till midnight. If I were in Philadelphia, I'd buy bottled water. The problem is there was a mass run on bottled water because of we advise you to consider buying bottled water. I mean, we don't have them, but there was images and video all over Twitter of lines and lines all over Philly. I spoke with someone who couldn't get it in Philly, so had to drive to Jersey for bottled water. And we're getting from the media, all clear, they say, move on. Now we could turn to the school shooting that we'll cover for 5 minutes before going back to whatever crazy shit Trump said. But I don't know. How do you know it's safe? And by the way, Lewis, you're a little younger than I, but for you water aficionados out there, Philadelphia, many years ago, the Philadelphia Water Department was caught manipulating testing and manipulating data, just like Flint, Detroit, and many other water departments have manipulated data. So I don't 100% trust what the Philadelphia Water Department is telling me. So yeah, I mean, this just goes to show you, do you notice, Lewis, we're having a shit ton of derailments and plant explosions
Chemical
and
spills
cars
literally today.
tipping over with highly
Runaway train
flammable.
today. There was literally a runaway train today that I don't know where this has been now, but a train that had 200 or so cars on it with no one on board traveling a decent speed today. Zaina had flagged this for us earlier today. I mean, there is all sorts of crazy stuff like this happening every single day, it seems. So people do need to wake up and start to pay attention to this stuff, because at the rate that it's happening, if it hasn't happened in your town or city yet, I mean, at the rate it's happening, it's going to be there soon.
Absolutely. So we will continue following up. To tell you the truth, in all these situations, it's not like I have environmental experts on speed dial everywhere. So I fished around yesterday to see if I could find some environmental activists in Philly to get a straight answer. And I got a hold of two, and they have no idea what's going on because the transparency is not present. So they're basically going on the confusing, contradicting comments that came out of Bucks County officials and Philadelphia officials and the state environmental department, but they really don't know. But they told me, if it's Philadelphia, don't trust. Immediately, we don't trust. So, yeah, I mean, it sucks. If you're in Philly, bottled water is expensive. I'm not a science expert, or, I'm not telling you what to do, but I can't say if it were me, I would be drinking bottled water for a while, and I would be waiting till independent, not the state water department. Not one test, but several tests were back. Because like Lewis said, butyl acrylate, no, it's not going to kill you right away, but it's not good to have long-term and we're not talking about 100 gallons, over 8,000 gallons. And by the way, in many of these cases, whether it be with toxic chemicals or oil, what they first reported was spilled. It's later revised, and you find out, it was actually 50,000 gallons spilled. Any parting thoughts before we move on to East Palestine?
No, I mean, again, I think it's just people need to be alert to this sort of thing happening. And unfortunately, the more that, I'd heard stories about stuff like this from you and from others in Flint and Jackson, and seeing firsthand the absolute shit show of organization by federal and state governments when it comes to testing and what to test for. I mean, I've said this a couple times. It sounds like people are conspiracy theorists when they're saying, well, I don't trust the test from the EPA and I don't trust this test. These people need to be questioning it. You need to be questioning it, because it's actually happening. Things aren't being tested for that should be tested for. Results have been manipulated by companies that are hired out as contractors by the EPA, by, in the East Palestine situation, by the railroad. These are actual real things that have happened. They are facts. They're not, speculation. That when you look back at the stuff in the past that's happened, it has happened time and time again in the past, where these results are manipulated, where these things haven't been tested for. So you need to ask the questions when this is happening in your town, your community, your city, if you want to be able to get any answers.
Absolutely. And I'm putting in the super chat, if any of you live in Philadelphia or just want to know what I was talking about in terms of Philly and other cities being caught many years ago manipulating. In that case, it was lead data. So this is a story from The Guardian. I just put it in the super chat. By the way, hook us up, some super chats. That would be nice. Drop it in the super chat if you can. So moving on, we are now 50 some odd days after this East Palestine train derailment. We have some stories that we're kind of working on behind the scenes, but we don't quite want to say anything yet because we're digging and it takes time. But there is something I think is pretty significant that somebody who's been working on he's a producer for Pacifica Radio, but has been, kind of compiling a lot of research on East Palestine and been doing great work. A source of Eric, let me make sure I have his name right.
Eric Coppolino.
Eric Coppolino, who, let me give you his Colin, if you have that, it's on the Twitter sheet under East Palestine, Planet Waves FM. That's his Substack. So I'll put this in the super chat too, but you could read along with us. So Eric Coppolino has a source who used to be with the EPA. Lewis and I both know the source, but we're not going to say who it is because we haven't been given permission. But similar source to who Eric has. And Eric's been writing about testing. He's been writing a lot about the dioxins, and his facts check out. So he's a resource we've used. We've invited him on to do an interview. So hopefully that'll happen soon. But Eric, got a hold of a EPA regulation from 2022. So we're talking a year ago. And they call it a guideline because the EPA is too toothless to put in too many actual laws. But it's a guideline that if you actually read it, a lot of big words, kind of complicated, but actually says and speaks and advises against the quote controlled burn that you saw in East Palestine. Let me read a little bit. It actually looks like Eric is here to join us, which is awesome. But let me read a little bit before I bring him on. So this is his Substack. Go check it out. Planet Waves FM. We'll put it in the description. EPA violated its own rules when it allowed the dumping and burning of 125,000 gallons of vinyl chloride in East Palestine on February 6th. Public officials claim that doing this was preferable to risking an explosion, a potential scenario that itself has not been challenged thoroughly enough. A June 7th, 2022 guidance memo from the EPA interpreting federal regulations and bans the open detonation, open burning of toxins, i.e., controlled burn, which is just a PR term.
Yes,
it's not. You can't have a controlled burn. Let me say this again. EPA violated its own rules and committed crimes when it authorized the dumping and open burning of 125,000 gallons of vinyl chloride. My source is a former official in EPA's enforcement division. Public officials are so shameless that they have tried to pin responsibility for the dump and burn operation on the local fire chief. A proper recovery operation was initiated the night of the derailment, so that was February 3rd, but was called off, according to a source close to the railroad industry. Read the rules for yourself. I don't know if you could zoom in there so people could see, but in 1980, the EPA prohibited OB/OD of hazardous waste due to the potential risks to human health and the environment. EPA allowed one exception for OB/OD to treat waste explosives with no safe mode of treatment.
And I want to chime in and just say OB/OD is open burn or open detonation.
Thank you. In 2019, EPA and the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine published separate reports that document safe alternatives are available for managing waste explosives. This memorandum responds to questions on how to apply the existing requirements in light of this information. Under the existing requirements, open burn, open detonation facilities must evaluate and reevaluate whether safe alternative technologies are available to treat their waste explosives. Where safe alternatives are available, facilities must use those in lieu of open burn, open detonate. So let's bring on Eric, again, author of Planet Waves, which I'd recommend everybody subscribing to. Thanks for joining us.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
I can.
Good. All right.
So let me just ask you in layman terms, because reading the memo, which we'll put on the screen, the memo as well, it could get a little complicated. But my understanding of this memorandum, which was an EPA guideline from just a year ago, was basically if you had something like this, not necessarily a train derailment, but any type of situation where volatile chemicals were in the mix, volatile organic compounds, that you could not just blow it up without first, weighing alternative means.
That rule is actually from 1980.
Wow.
The memo that I published, and I'm about to potentially break a story on your program. The memo that I published was a 2022 clarification of the 1980 rule under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, passed in 1976 when there was a big environmental movement going on, and Toxic Substances Control Act was passed and all that stuff. So too was the Resource Recovery RCRA Act. The 2022 memo, the point of that memo is to clarify the EPA's position on the dumping and burning of munitions on military bases. So that was a negotiated agreement. I've got the notes of the people involved, and I can't go into all the details of what I learned today. I can go into some of them, though, and it's going to see the light of day for the first time on your program here. That was merely a clarification of existing law and CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, to clarify that the military could not be granted a license to dump and burn old munitions until it had gone through the alternatives process. So the rule says there must be an alternatives process, and then there has to be, once you've done that, then you can do the open dump and burn when you have no other choice. And what this memo does is it clarifies the order of operations, that they can't be granted the permission to open dump and burn until they've gone through the study of the alternatives.
Right. So are you saying that, or, and answer in the best of your ability, I guess, on this. So if the, EPA or if the decision makers in charge of the decision for the vent and burn did not go through and essentially say that there were no safe options available, or in this case, if they did set this all on fire, they were assuming that they went through and determined that there were no safe options available. I'm curious at this point, are we aware of what other options were on the table at that point?
Yeah, this kind of thing happens routinely, and there are teams set up around the country whose job it is, they're basically tanker truck drivers with special training where they know how to put on the scuba gear, and they have all the special couplings to connect their trucks to the various train cars. And so every 2 weeks or so, they're sorry about these glasses being so reflective.
You're fine. Don't worry about it.
You look like a rock star.
Astrologer. I'm a rock star astrologer. So there's a routine. It's a routine. They do this all the time. I spent the afternoon on the phone with a source who I can't disclose right now. So I have it all on, not for attribution, but we spent 2 hours putting our notes together. We're both many-year veterans in this business. Sometimes I feel like I know that much from talking to this person. So, and I'm really hungry, so I'm not fully grounded. I was about to eat something, but let's do this. So there's never, ever, once, ever been a dump and burn in the history of railroads, civilian, ever. Even before it was made illegal in 1980. So at the time it was made illegal to dump and burn, or to dump and detonate, or whatever the fuck, they had never done this. And there's a National Transportation Safety Board report about every train derailment and tanker incident for the previous 10 years, from 69 to 79, right before the report was issued. And you can't find a single dump and burn from a civilian railroad. It is not done. It is illegal. It is against every regulation, and there's no reason to do it. So these.
So can I just ask you to clarify that point? What the 2022 stated memorandum, the way I read it was a guideline. So is it a guideline or a law?
It's a guidance of the interpretation of a Code of Federal Regulations regulation, which the law says the EPA must make. So when a federal law is made, the federal law in this kind of situation, there's a lot of federal laws, but in this kind of situation, the law directs the agency to promulgate regulations that are then entered in the Code of Federal Regulations. These have the force and effect of law. The law is not valid until those regulations are put in place. So the law is essentially unenforceable. So the enforcement piece comes from CFR. Then the EPA gives guidance memos of how to interpret the regulations, which themselves have essentially the power of law.
I see.
Okay, so it's all this, that part's all legit. But what I learned today was this 2022 memo was negotiated from people who were trying to stop military installations from doing dump and burn of munitions. Setting that aside for a moment, here are the facts I'm going to point to, and trust me, I would never have gone near this had someone not put the fact pattern together. Because my approach is I take everything prima facie. I take all the known and available facts and I start to assemble them. Like when you open up a puzzle, you assume that there's going to be a square, that the You can find all those pieces, right? So the way that I do things is I put that square together, and I'm also keen for looking on what is not true, right? Course in Miracles puts it plainly. You don't have to look for the truth. Don't bother. Only look for what's not true, and then you'll be left with what is true. I never would have gone here, had this person who I spent the afternoon with her on the phone, and there was not one thing she said that didn't work for me. Here are the facts. So there's never been a dump and burn in railroad history. And she said these accidents happen every 2 weeks, and she deals with most of them in her position. She's in the non-governmental sector. Second, the tanker truck recovery operation was initiated the night of February 3rd, and I now have this from 2 sources. One source close to the railroad industry. I can't compromise this person, but I trust this person personally, because it was kind of like a girlfriend's boyfriend who came forward and said, let me tell you what happened. So this is family. So she confirmed that they had the scuba tanker truck driver operation initiated, and then the guys were all sent home. So there's a bunch of truck drivers, a fleet of truck drivers around the country with special training, who are then summoned to the scene, often from out of state, to the scene of tanker car derailments, and they know how to do what's called decant, like pouring wine from a bottle into a flask. Decant the chemicals. Third, no samples of soot or wipe samples are available. There's no original samples from inside the tanker cars or from the scene of the crime. So there's been no, and my recording's not happening. I'm going to have to ask you for a copy of this recording. I really need it. Can you get this to me soon, please?
We're live.
I record every interview,
Yeah.
and
We're live.
I'm about to break news on your show, so bear with me here a second. It took me the entire afternoon and 2 months to get this straight. Next, scoop. So no samples are available at the crime scene. There's no crime scene samples. No soot, no wipes off the cars. Next, the decision to breach, dump, and burn was totally irrational, and no one understands it. No one's ever seen it. I'm talking to people who have 50 years experience doing these kind of incidents, and they have nothing. Next, so it's completely irrational. This is the elephant in the room. Why in God's name do they do this? No one understands it. And furthermore, when they do have to dump, they don't burn, they just dump, and then they take it off in front-end loaders and cart it off to a hazardous waste landfill. It was the combination of breach, dump, and burn. The breach involved explosives. According to a Pennsylvania lawsuit and this source, they blew the tankers up with a thing called a shaped charge. The shaped charges had to be ordered and flown privately to the scene. They can't be flown commercially, and they had to get all the way from Louisiana to Ohio. Next, samples from a special mobile lab are not being released. Carnegie Mellon deployed a piece of equipment owned by someone else, and the samples, the results of those samples are not being released. I know who has them. I'm going to try to get them, but obviously there's a reason they're not being released. Next, the PRVs, pressure release valves, were working fine, according to the National Safety Transportation NTSB report from last week. So if there was indeed vinyl chloride monomer in these cars and it was polymerizing and releasing heat and gases, these valves were all functional according to the NTSB. They took them, they analyzed them, they were fine. So now I have several sources saying, well, the car was going to blow up and cause shrapnel. What a joke.
Right, and I heard that from I think you've spoken at some point to Aaron Bragg at one point too, and he talked to me quite a bit about the pressure relief valves, and if those were functioning, it would make it so that the cars wouldn't be at risk of like sudden explosion essentially. Yes, and I keep hearing from different sources, no, that whole version of events has a problem, but we now know from the NTSB the PRVs were working. So this is crucial. Anyone who says they're not working is going contrary to the facts. Okay, next, PRVs. Okay, then a company called CTEH took samples on behalf of the railroad. Those guys, according to my understanding, they took their samples. They have crime scene samples. They took those samples to Louisiana. They were deployed to Arkansas to headquarters, and their plane crashed on their next mission
on the way back to Ohio for a foundry explosion. Now they're gone. Eyewitnesses are gone. Their samples are not gone. Next, according to my source who handles mass poisonings daily, people are still sick in East Palestine in a way they should not be based on the chemicals known to be on the train. And this would probably include dioxin, which is not the world's best acute toxin at the levels that are said to be present in East Palestine. People are very sick. The peeled paint is also an issue. That's really pretty strange. Peeled paint.
Both. Could you walk back that the plane part? I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying what was brought on a plane to
5 people, five hazmat workers, sample people who work for a company called CTEH.
Yeah,
are dead. And I'm not, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but but we can't leave this out of the fact pattern because they were eyewitnesses to the sampling at the crime scene. And the thing I've been demanding all along is crime scene samples. Nobody's taken soot. Nobody's taken wipes off the cars. So all we get are these kind of random samples taken from various different places. So now we have eyewitnesses to that sampling, and they are gone.
And I will say too, I mean, those samples were brought up in at least 2 different hearings. I know in the Pennsylvania Senate hearing, Senators Muth and Mastriano brought up several times, why haven't you released any of these samples from especially in the immediate time frame of the controlled burn, as well as right afterwards. These were questions to Alan Shaw, and he was like, "Oh, they exist, but they still at this point have not received any of them." Yeah,
right.
But when you say, I just want to make sure we have it accurate. When you say they're dead, you're saying when did they die? How did they die? Because that's obviously a big.
They died in a plane crash in Arkansas. Hold on.
Yeah, I can look this up too. I've heard a little bit about this.
But let me keep going. We don't want to lose the thread here. That's
Yeah.
just one fact in this pattern is that we have eyewitnesses sampling crime scene samples, the one samples we don't have. Next, people are still sick in Palestine in a way they shouldn't be based on her 30 years of experience handling mass poisoning incidents. So now we get to what was in those train cars. I am reluctantly forced to conclude there is probable cause to assume that something other than vinyl chloride monomer was being transported in those train cars because of all of these unprecedented things. The unprecedented dump and burn, the calling off the recovery operation. I was shocked when I heard that more than a month ago, that there was a recovery operation, that they had deployed the tanker trucks. These are specially trained people, and now I have from 2 reliable sources that they were called off. Why dump and burn? You could just dump and remove it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So with this list of questions, we have to ask now what was in those train cars.
And also, can we talk about February 3rd to February 6th? My understanding is originally, I think your report also said that originally the response was fine, but then they decided they were going to blow up the cars. At first, they decided they were going to blow up 1, then it became 5. Obviously, we know it wasn't a small town fire chief making this decision. I mean, only the mainstream media would regurgitate that nonsense. So either you had Norfolk Southern making this decision or the EPA making this decision. You also have the fact that the governor did not declare a state of emergency there. So technically, since he did not declare a state of emergency, Norfolk Southern is in the driver's seat. The EPA does not have a lead role because a state of emergency.
That's not true. It's not true.
Well, by law, it is.
A lead role they invoke their power under section. I gave that in the article. They invoke their power is notwithstanding state of emergency. It can be a suspected or potential release that they have power under this act. I'm not looking at those notes. They're in the Substack. So that's a red herring. That's a false argument. They do have.
Well, according to the Stafford Act, that by that law, the EPA, unless a state of emergency is declared, does not have the lead role. I mean, I'm not defending the EPA. I'm stating that the fact that he has not declared a state of emergency, that's why a lot of questions have been asking, why is Norfolk Southern doing the testing in the first place when the EPA could do the dioxin testing? So that's what I'm inferring by that.
Well, federal agencies often require the potentially responsible party to hire a neutral contractor to do the work. This has always led to scandals.
Right.
This sort of self-regulation of the EPA and the FDA and others has always led to problems. And then the data is reviewed by the government entity, but it's almost always a contractor doing the work, right? On behalf of, at SUNY New Paltz, the state hired a contractor that did the work.
Right.
The state didn't have these type of employees, so they had to hire various companies so it's typical. It's typical. But what I'm saying here is that these circumstantial facts, they are facts, point to a question, which is the only question I think you can ask, given the facts, what was in those train cars? What was really in those train cars?
Right. And I mean, even in my discussion that I had with Aaron Bragg, he talked about a first responder who told him on scene that several first responders were pulled back because the benzene levels were too high, was something that we had heard. And also Aaron had shared with us at one point, benzene, there were cars that supposedly had been carrying benzene. They had benzene residue. But according to Aaron, at least, who is a industrial gases expert, has dealt with inspecting cars and whatnot. From his assessment, something can be deemed a residue car as long as it is less than half full. Right. I forget the specific number of gallons that would be involved in something like this, but I think it was over 10,000, thousands of gallons of these materials could be inside of the trains at this point. I'm speculating, we don't know that is the case here, but Aaron is someone that I definitely trust his opinion. And if someone were to say something to him, I trust him at face value on that he's got first responders telling him they got pulled back because the benzene levels were too high. We also have first responders who have definitely dealt with lots of symptoms as a result of this. I'm curious if that's something you're looking into, or if you think
here's the thing. They wouldn't need to cover up benzene.
Okay,
there's only two classes of chemicals that are illegal to transport by law and by treaty. Polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, and chemical weapons.
Interesting.
Those are the facts. You can even tote around DDT. You can tote around all the opioids you want. You can tote it all around, except for polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, and chemical weapons. They weren't PCBs. Now, we have no tests to indicate what they actually were, but the contrary to Carl Sagan, the absence of evidence is relevant, especially in chemical testing. The absence of evidence means that something's missing, especially if you want to prove what is true, but you can't.
Well, also, I think you made a point that's important. Obviously, Lewis has reported extensively on the testing, which doesn't pass the smell test, but something is making these people sick, and that something does not really match with necessarily vinyl chloride wouldn't do all of these things at once. Dioxin would do some of these things, but there are, based on the kind of plethora of symptoms, because we're talking everything from burning eyes, diarrhea, vomiting, dizziness, folks talking about leg burns, people talking about shaking. There's such a cross section of symptoms we've come across from residents that it doesn't necessarily match everything that they have said was on that train.
Yeah, and there was also combustion in combination, so you're going to get synergistic effects. And so there is a valid counter argument to the ongoing illness. So there's a couple. One is the aeration process, right? They're aerating the streams so that the thing doesn't get into the Ohio River. Okay, that could be making people sick, but they should evacuate for that. There's certain of these chemicals are activated as the weather gets warm and the light is brighter rather than when it's cold and dim out. And so phosgene, for example, would be activated, but it would slowly seep out of the basement and so forth and so on. So there is, and my source presented me with a diversity of counter arguments to what may be making people sick. But we still have a question. We still have all 8 other or 9 other points that I've raised here,
right?
None of which make any sense, particularly the dump and burn when there were other options. They could have had those cars. She said that typically you can decant that many rail cars in 48 hours. They'll have the trucks there, and they could have just taken it somewhere. They could have had an extra special operation. They could have had 100 tanker trucks there. It's a big country with a lot of industry. They could have had 100 tanker trucks there in, a day.
Right.
Why not? Why did they send them home? And my source said Friday night, and my first source said Friday night. My second source said within 24 hours. There's no contradiction. There was no recovery effort. They went straight to dump and burn.
But if your argument, or what seems to be an open question here, is if there were even more deadly and dangerous chemicals on that train, then essentially it seems that they blew it up using this village as a sacrifice zone to basically hide what was on the train, destroy what was on the train.
Well, let's assume they were. Let's play the thought experiment of, let's say that it was an illegal chemical being transported, something they didn't want to get out. They didn't want ready samples of. Well, that would be a good reason to do this. I mean, a lot of people burn the house down after they kill the family. I mean, that's an old maneuver, right? And that's what this is like. And the thing is, it all makes so little sense that you have to ask, how can all this be extant and make so little sense for so long? So I had to agree that this points to an overwhelming question. What was in those tanker cars?
Right.
And why don't we know?
And my last question, essentially, if there is a law dating back to the 80s against this open burn, open detonation, and then in 2022, there's a revision that is stated as a guideline, but really is to reinforce
the guidance.
Yeah, a guidance. Essentially, if the EPA either was the one making this decision and they just threw this poor son of a gun fire chief under the bus, if the EPA made this decision, or Norfolk Southern really was in the driver's seat, but the EPA just kind of let them do whatever they want, the EPA would have been breaking its own law. Do we have that right?
Well, yeah. But why would the EPA they were there, first of all. They were notified 2 hours in. They were on scene. And I'm going to say that they're going to have jurisdiction no matter what in an emergency under I forget the name of the particular regulation where they draw their power from.
If it's the one from your Substack article, you list here National Contingency Plan Section 106. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so they have to be able to act prior to the declaration of an emergency if they have to do something. But they were on scene. And so everything is done with their tacit approval, at least.
Right.
So we are left with we're left with a whole new story here.
Absolutely. Any other questions, Louis?
I've got a lot of questions that we're not going to have answers for right now, I think. So let's stay in touch. Eric Coppolino, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll make sure that the Substack article is linked here for folks to check out. And let's definitely stay in touch, Eric.
Fabulous. And just tell me how to get hold of this program. I assume you're going to post it.
Yes, we can make sure you get it in an email right after this.
I'd be very, very grateful. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I know that StreamYard doesn't let me capture the audio. Anyway, guys, thank you. Nice to meet you. More lifeboat friends, right? We're just thrown into the lifeboat together, and here we are. You guys seem great, so thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric.
All right.
Take care.
Bless.
So, yeah, we'll say a couple things before we move on. So, I mean, flat out, just to be responsible journalists, we cannot independently at Status Coup confirm everything he said. We can confirm the EPA regulation that is from last year. That's in his Substack piece, Colin. It's in the live doc. If you could put up that EPA memo, it's under the it's under the Substack piece. rcra.epa.gov, that file. So we can confirm that last year there was a revision of an EPA guidance from 1980 that basically, if you really want to, shoot yourself in the head, I'll put it in the description and you can read it tonight. It's a long memo, but it essentially is a guideline against doing an open burn, controlled burn, open detonation.
Unless every single element has been ruled out beforehand. You need to do anything that you can to prevent that. That should be the final straw if you get to that point. Yeah.
So this we can confirm. Everything else, listen, I'm not stating that Eric is wrong, but obviously a lot of what he is reporting on, and I think I know one of his sources. I don't know all his sources.
Right.
Obviously, we're all journalists, so we might have some crossover in sources, or we might have different sources. So I'm not saying his sources are wrong. I'm just saying we're not going to just report and we're not going to state as fact what he's being told by sources we haven't talked to or vetted. But with that said,
I'll also add to, I mean, some of the things that he, again, can't confirm all of it, but some of the things that he was mentioning with the pressure relief valves is something that we talked extensively with Aaron Bragg about in that interview that's posted on the channel. Aaron has literally inspected these cars before as part of his job. So that element of things sounds familiar. And he kind of goes into detail in that interview saying that if these pressure relief valves on these trains were to be functioning properly, which it sounds like at least on 4 of the 5 cars, they were potentially on the 5th. We don't know. But at least on 4 of the 5 cars, it seems that they were functioning properly. That is a red flag that this potential sort of unloading of the materials of at least those ones could have been possible in a safer manner. And then the plane thing I haven't looked too much into, but I did do a quick search and found a couple news articles from reputable sources.
That's I mean, with respect, that's speculation. So
right.
5 CTEH officials did die in a plane crash on the way to plane crash in Little Rock around noon Wednesday. So this was on February 23rd. So this is about a week and a half, 2 weeks after the derailment. Controlled burn. Sure. I mean, if we want to, connect dots because we want it to be true, we could say these folks were witnesses to everything Eric just said and they offed them. We can't say that because we don't know. I don't know what caused the plane crash. It certainly is an odd occurrence. And 5 people died. So obviously that's sad. But yeah, we can't conclusively connect dots. Obviously we'll look into all these things, but I think there's a couple things that Eric's story and this EPA document that there's room for follow-up. Number one, you got to remember they didn't tell the first responders what was on that train. So the firemen and some women were not told what they were trying to put out. From what the rail union workers said, the rail workers were not completely told what was on that train when they were going to help with the cleanup. Neither firefighters or rail workers were given the proper PPE because, frankly, if it's worse chemicals than we were led to believe, I mean, you could wear a respirator, but that probably isn't going to do much if you're talking about high grade chemical weapons, even the best respirator. you would need a full hazmat suit and then, cross your fingers. So you had lack of transparency in the beginning for the first responders. Then you get to the fact of the combustion element where we don't know, and they certainly weren't transparent on all the combinations between these chemicals combusting and what could form from that. But you look at, and Louis, you and I have been asking this question from the beginning, and nobody in the media in Ohio seems to want to ask the governor or the EPA. They just regurgitate whatever bullshit they say.
Right.
If you're saying the testing is coming back, smelling fresh as roses, what are all these people sick with? Right. What is causing these symptoms?
Right.
Because vinyl chloride would cause some of this. Dioxins would cause some of this.
Right. The chemical byproducts of setting these things on fire. I mean, I've gone through this before, but when you burn vinyl chloride, you end up with phosgene is one of the byproducts. You end up with hydrogen chloride as one of the byproducts. You end up with formaldehyde as one of the byproducts. There's all sorts of things, and even some of those things that I just listed haven't really been appropriately tested for when you look at the devices in question that they're using. So yeah.
And also, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to point this part out. Mm-hmm. And I'll have to follow up on what Eric was saying, but my understanding is if the governor has not issued a state of emergency, the EPA can do its own testing. So it's not like the EPA can't do its own testing if the governor doesn't issue a state of emergency. Mm-hmm. But the fact that the governor has not issued a state of emergency keeps the EPA in a secondary role. Now, maybe there's some other provision he knows that I don't. This is based on my knowledge and reporting on Flint and other places. But this is why when they say, oh, the EPA was going to allow Norfolk Southern to do the testing. No. For dioxins, for example. The reason, to my knowledge, that's happening is because the EPA cannot just unilaterally do the testing unless they have the lead role. Maybe Norfolk Southern doesn't want the EPA doing the lead testing for dioxins for obvious reasons. So right. I'll follow up on that point. I'll look into whatever he's talking about. But I think overall, the biggest things in his report, I'm not getting into the plane crash because I don't know what caused the plane crash, and right. I think it's irresponsible without ironclad proof to suggest that these people, that this was a nefarious, they offed these employees because they were witnesses. We don't know, so we're not going to speculate. But I do believe we have not been fully told what was on that train. It would make sense if there was worse things on that train that Norfolk Southern will want to cover it up. To me, I know that the EPA, from my other reporting, has looked the other way in the past when they knew cheating was going on. Mm-hmm. And let's not forget, President Biden blocked a union strike at the end of last year. President Biden blocked a railroad strike and basically gave the railroad industry whatever the hell they wanted. Right. They were allowed to continue to not pay their workers paid sick leave. They were allowed to continue with a lot of these loose regulations. So the fact that the EPA we don't have evidence yet, but if the EPA has looked the other way, if more things were on that train, worse things were on that train, there's also a connection to the fact that the EPA is a federal agency under President Biden. And President Biden emboldened the railroad industry, so might not want it revealed. Mm-hmm. You're connecting dots here? Right. Might not want it revealed, the president, that they had much worse on that train because he's the one who blocked railroad workers from going on strike over things like safety.
Yeah, I mean, lots. I've got a lot of questions after that. I'm definitely gonna dig into all this. So for folks who just watched that, I mean, stay tuned because we're gonna definitely go through a lot of this information that we just got literally live as this was happening. So we'll go through and try to confirm as much as we can. I'm gonna go through and talk to. I've got additional sources I can reach out to try to confirm or sort out a lot of what we just talked about right here. And in general, I mean, there are still lots of stories that have not been uncovered yet in East Palestine. The importance of continuing to hammer on this one topic. I'm spending the vast majority of my time while working here with Status Coup on this story because there is so many unanswered questions at this point. We're already talking about getting back getting me back to East Palestine for a third time. We've got almost 700 people watching still. The only way that we're able to continue to push this story forward is to continue to get on the ground in East Palestine. And that's only possible by membership. It's literally $5 a month, $10 a month if you want to. That is literally the price of a shitty cup of coffee at Starbucks or wherever it may be. Skip one of them, and it might not seem like a lot, but it makes a difference to continue to have boots on the ground in these places. I'm still talking to residents literally every single day. I've got text messages from somebody that I'm literally going to call right after I get off here to continue to work on another story that we have not released yet. So if you're able to join, we've got a bunch of folks watching right now.
And I'll be a little bit less tactful than Lewis. We're going to need more members if we're sending Lewis back to East Palestine.
Yeah.
We between Lewis's last 2 trips to East Palestine, plus some other stories we covered on the ground, we spent like 10 grand in the last 2 months just on travel and, paying Lewis and camera people to be on the ground. So we're not like talking the talk. Hey, give us money and we'll try to do things. We're walking the walk. You see, Lewis has been out there twice. We've been covering this as humbly as I could say it, more consistently, and I think better than any corporate outlet or independent outlet. So we want to continue, but it costs money. I got to pay Lewis. We're trying to have Lewis do more with us. We got to pay camera people, flights, hotels, rent a car. You've heard all this. So if you're not a member yet, and I'm sure there's over 600 people watching, if you're not a member yet, consider signing up ASAP, statuscoup.com/join. The other thing and you get perks as a member, by the way. So if you sign up, we have a monthly call we do with our members through Zoom, behind the scenes videos from our on the ground trips. We have a members only Discord. So you get stuff in addition to supporting us, and we'll shout you out if you sign up while we're live. The last thing I'll say, over 600 people watching. I'm going to make a direct ask to folks in the railroad industry. Folks at the EPA, ain't my first rodeo. I've had a lot. Let me tell you something. I've spoken with a shit ton of whistleblowers and spent a lot of time trying to respectfully get them to go on the record. And for a lot of reasons in Flint and elsewhere, they chose not to go on the record for fear to their family or their career. And, as pissed off as I was as a journalist, because they had a lot of meat, and I wanted them to go on the record. I respected it because we all have to look out for ourselves, our family, etc. But to anyone, because there are, and we've spoken with some off the record, there are whistleblowers from Norfolk Southern. There are whistleblowers from the EPA. I believe there are whistleblowers from the company that's doing the testing. In my view, is doing the testing wrong intentionally. I know that there are good people in all these entities who are aghast at what they're seeing. So I can assure you this, if you want to go on the record of what you're seeing, I cannot assure you, a blanket cloak of protection. But Aaron Brockovich once said to a Flint resident, an activist who was concerned about her safety if she blew the whistle, it's been told to me that the number one way, if you want to do the right thing, the number one way to protect yourself and your family is to actually be public, and loud and out there. Because the more you are out there, the more visible you are, and you have facts to back it up, then if they try to fuck with you, it's only going to be pointing in one direction, who tried to harm you or who attempted to do something untoward towards you. And they're usually going to do it. They're usually going to do the worst. And when I say they, I'm talking about private contractors, private security, a powerful company. They're usually going to potentially target you before you speak out. After you speak out, you've actually given yourself a little protection because you're in the public. People know who you are, what your role is or was. And if they do anything, where do you think the authorities are going to be first looking? Where do you think the public is going to be first looking if something happens to you? So if you are a whistleblower, please reach out to us. There's a lot of ways you could do it privately. info@statuscoup.com. I'm on Signal. So our Signal number is on my personal Twitter and on Status Coup's Twitter. I have a Proton email, jordanchariton@protonmail.com. That's jordanchariton@protonmail.com, which is encrypted and more protected. So if you're a whistleblower and you want to tell us things you know, either about the February 3rd derailment, either about the February 6th controlled burn, i.e. uncontrolled burn, about other things you know about Norfolk Southern, anything you know about the EPA. You know what? It's cheesy. A wise man once told me it's never too late to do the right thing. So reach out to us, info@statuscoup.com, Jordan Chariton at protonmail.com. I'm talking about whistleblowers. I don't want everybody and their dog emailing me tonight at my Proton mail. I got enough email. Lewis, thank you for joining. By the way, don't go anywhere because we have another toxic fucking cesspool that we're about to report on that the mainstream media has been ignoring. And Democrat Governor Gretchen Whitmer, in my view, has not only been ignoring, but rewarding. The state of Michigan has been rewarding a company that is contaminating a poor Black community to the point that I believe, based on the statistics, people are dying and becoming chronically sick. So don't go anywhere. Lewis, any parting words?
No, I mean, I'll give a quick 10-second update too. I mean, we did reach out again to the mayor and to the city council on an update on the Easter egg debacle going on in East Palestine. Given that experts, including Dr. Welton, are now coming out against it, saying it's unsafe. It's been, since my initial reaching out on Friday, it's been 4 full days at this point. No response at all, unfortunately, from the city council in East Palestine on potentially rescheduling this event. Given what we've just talked about, folks are still getting sick. Things are not happening. We need to keep talking about this story. So, yeah, happy to be on again. And
United Corporations of America.
Yeah.
They detonate a fucking train full of God knows what chemicals. People are having nosebleeds, diarrhea, vomiting, chemical burns on their face, arms, back, legs. Chemical bronchitis they're being diagnosed with, but it's okay if the kids go on an Easter egg hunt.
Let's have an Easter egg hunt. Let's see what kind of Easter surprise, unfortunately, folks will end up with if that ends up being the case.
Correct. And welcome, new Status Coup member just signed up. Sue just signed up. So hopefully you are the beginning of a couple people who sign up today. All right,
Absolutely.
Lewis, talk to you in a bit.
See ya.
I want to, before we bring on our next guest, I want to show some videos. This is not East Palestine. This is Kalamazoo, Michigan. And it's not from a month or 2 months ago. It's from a week ago and last night. Colin, let's show those first two videos that I tweeted earlier.
This is graphic packaging. And the smell out here is choking the shit out of me right now. Today is Sunday, March 26th. This is graphic packaging, and the odor stink is burning my eyes and my throat.
So that's Kalamazoo. It's in the western part of Michigan. It had a really infamous oil spill a long time ago, and a paper mill, Graphic Packaging, has been releasing a toxic gas into the air. I'll get I believe for well over a decade at this point. And it's been in a part of Kalamazoo that is poor, predominantly Black. And the Michigan Department of Health and Environmental Department have known about this for a long time and basically have done nothing but stonewall residents and activists who have been fighting to shut down this plant because people are getting sick. But not only have they looked the other way, recently the state helped this corporate polluter expand. Joining me now, Brandy Crawford, David Banak. I hope I pronounced that right. Brandy, you and I have talked many times. And I think people need to know now that East Palestine and what's happened there is, high in people's minds. It's not just East Palestine that has toxic clouds. And in your case, tell us how long this has been going on there.
It's been going on since, I just found out, David knows too. I just want to say too, that it's in the environmental justice community, but since this expansion has increased pollution by 700,000 tons, it's moved into Dr. David Banak's neighborhood too, which is predominantly white. So it's actually spread throughout the whole city. The pollution is causing health symptoms. But the graphic packaging's been there for 100 years. Or well over 100 years, I think, even more than that. But the gas leaks that they haven't fixed, I only became aware of in 2009 through the Freedom of Information request I did through the city of Kalamazoo. So the gas leaks still aren't fixed. There's no cap on the wastewater clarifier graphic packaging, and the junction chamber between the city wastewater plant and graphic packaging is still not fixed. And I feel like those are two of the biggest culprits on top of the increase of pollution that are causing the health symptoms and the deaths in the city.
And if people didn't hear in that video, a woman was saying the smell out here is choking the shit out of me. So that video, I think, was taken about a week ago. And last night, I think it was a teenager took the video. The odor stink is burning my eyes and my throat. And that is from a toxic gas that has been coming out of graphic packaging, the paper mill, I mean, indefinitely. If you, Colin, if you have this article here, it's under the Kalamazoo section, graphic packaging forced to publicize data from toxic gas sensors at Kalamazoo facility. So this was in February of this year that the company is being forced to share information from sensors measuring toxic gas found in the air at its facility. The mandate is due to an order finalized today to resolve multiple violations alleged by the state. So that would sound wonderful, David, that, oh, the state's doing something. But it's my understanding that Brandy and some others have been pleading with the state about graphic packaging forever, pointing out that Kalamazoo has high levels of asthma, respiratory issues, and the state, I mean, basically stonewalled and ignored for a while until finally taking some action, the most of which has been fines.
Yeah, and Brandon, I'm going to just jump in to add some context to what Brandy was saying about how long they've been here, which you started with. So Kalamazoo is a paper town. It used to be all paper mills. And what Brandy's talking about, that facility where graphic packaging is, yeah, they've been there for forever. But graphic packaging itself has only been there since '99. But what is interesting, they came to town in '99, took over the facility, and only 4 years later, there were complaints in front of the city commission. There weren't before. And then it was in 2009, you could really see people really getting more upset about it. You can just city commission minutes have all this information there. And Brandy used to be on the ECC, which is the Kalamazoo's Environmental Concerns Committee. I sit on that now. And that committee's been fighting with the city to try to do something about it for 5 years. It's been on every single agenda of the committee for 5 years. When the ECC tried to do something about it in 2019, that the ECC was going to put a recommendation for the city, because the committee doesn't have any legislative power, but they can make recommendations to the city. And we're going to make a recommendation. And that's when the city created this odor task force, and then just asked the Environmental Concerns Committee for just a little more time to get things worked out. And that's just a few months before they greenlit the facility to double its production. So like Brandy said, they were at about 500,000 tons of cardboard before, and then they added around 700,000 tons now. It's the largest facility of its type in the entire country.
And Colin, can we show the other videos that show what they're releasing during the day? I think there was 3 other videos.
This is graphic packaging, y'all. Today is January the 14th. Look at it. And I'm on Pitcher and Frank Street. Look how they got it. Look at graphic packaging. Look at all that pollution. Look at all that that's killing us, y'all. Do y'all see this? This is coming from graphic packaging. It's Saturday. They got it open full throttle. All that is poison, y'all. Y'all see that? All that. Y'all see all that black? Made trees. That's all the pollution that they putting up into the air. The spills into the water. I'm on my way home. But I'm going to keep filming for as long as I can. I'm going to go down this other street. And we're going to see if we still can see graphic packaging. It is 9:30 in the morning on Saturday, January 14th. All that pollution, y'all.
So we tried to get that woman on. It didn't work out today, but it's my understanding, Brandy or David, whichever one wants to take this, that her 17-year-old daughter died of a severe asthma attack. Her grandkids are all pretty sick. I believe her husband or boyfriend is having issues too. Whichever, obviously, it's emotional for everybody involved. Whichever one, I'm hoping I could interview her to hear from her. But could you describe her daughter dying? And I just want to show the statistics before we get to that, Colin. It's in the live stream, the live doc, the chart. This is from 2017. I asked Brandy if there's anything updated, but shockingly, the state of Michigan doesn't have the updated information. But this is from 2017, and you look at chronic lower respiratory diseases. Kalamazoo is over six percentage points higher than the U.S. average in terms of chronic lower respiratory diseases. 1.3% over the average in Michigan, and that's pure Michigan, by the way. That's what they call it. 48%. So obviously something's going on in the air there to cause this chronic respiratory disease. Brandy, if you want to describe Deanne's, her family problems.
She had some technical difficulties. I'm sorry for crying.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, Deanne's daughter died when she was 17, and her son. Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you. You there?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, she died when she was 17, and her son is 30 years old, and he had heart attacks and heart attacks from the asthma attacks, and he's 30 years old and on life support. She has asthma. Her other daughter has asthma. Everybody in the whole entire neighborhood has asthma, COPD, or emphysema, or cancer. And there's this other lady that called me the other day that said she had to quit working because her 2-year-old, 1-year-old, and 9-month-old grandchildren who she's raising has to go to the doctor every single day because of burning eyes and not being able to breathe. And so she has to take them to the doctor. So she had to quit her job, and she was crying about it. And that was the first time. I'm always meet new people that are going through something. And even though David's he's on the environmental concerns committee, he has headaches when he walks his dog too. Like this is affecting the whole entire city now. In the city of Kalamazoo, leaders, especially David Anderson, the mayor, he's told people to keep quiet about this. The reason why I quit the Environmental Concerns Committee is because they sent a cease and desist letter to the data company, Adams Data Solutions, for the American Lung Association, and reporters telling them to be quiet about their air quality. Do not report on their air quality for fear it will ruin their reputation. And David Anderson was the liaison and the ECC when I was there. It's the mayor and his best friend, Bobby Hopewell, who is on the Michigan Economic Development Council. They were pushing for this graphic packaging expansion.
Let me talk about that, and maybe you'll have some thoughts, David. This is in the live doc, Colin. Headline: Graphic Packaging holding to receive private bonds to finance expansion plans. If you could pull that up. So this is from, what year is this? 2021. So not too long ago. Graphic Packaging LLC, a packaging firm based in Atlanta, is expected to receive up to $125 million in private bonds to finance the expansion of its paper mill in Kalamazoo. the Michigan Economic Development Corporation Strategic Fund Board. By the way, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which I've dealt with in my Flint reporting, is a state body. So it kind of sounds like a private entity. It's basically a board with a lot of wealthy donors, i.e. America. So a lot of the donors who buy off the Republicans in Michigan, the Democrats in Michigan, you got real estate developers, foundation people, but it is a state board. They approved a resolution this month that allows this financing move to happen. David, I don't know. Am I in the twilight zone? If the Michigan Environmental Department, the Michigan Health Department know about the chronic pollution coming out of this plant, they've had complaints from the residents. I assume Governor Whitmer is either directly or peripherally aware of the issues. Why would they be involved with approving a pretty significant bond deal to expand operations there?
Well, yeah, Brandon, or does you like to say, Jordan? Yeah, it's the United Corporations of America. Yeah,
Thank you.
Graphic Packaging is a multi-billion-dollar company. So just what we're talking about here, they're a multi-billion-dollar company, and the excuse, there's always been two excuses as to why the city, the state, the county, nobody can take action against Graphic Packaging. One has always been that it's the city's wastewater treatment plant because it's next door to Graphic Packaging's facility. Well, the city has spent, tens of millions of dollars in the past just few years to make sure it's not the waste treatment plant. And there are sensors everywhere around the waste treatment plant to make sure it's not. So it's pretty much proven that it's not. The other thing is that the state is requiring that there is unimpeachable data that can prove everything before anything can be done. But there's no collection of that data. We don't have the monitors that can pick up the nitric oxides and other chemicals. Just this, when one of those videos that you showed, the one from, I think it was Saturday, I called the Department of Energy, Great Lakes and Environment, I think is EGLE, called to report the smell that was in my neighborhood. Not nearly as bad. I'm about a mile and a half, maybe 2 miles away from it on the west. And EGLE sends out a person who's doing her job. I'm not going to blame her for it. It's the way that EGLE does it, to do a sniff test, which not some special meter that sniffs the air. No, she gets out of her car, sniffs around, and is that dangerous? No, that's not dangerous. So that's good enough. So they're not collecting data in a scientific manner. And then they say they can't do anything because they don't have the data. So it's circular. There's nothing being done because there's no intention to do anything.
Right. And I mean, obviously there's other entities here, but we also have the fact that Kalamazoo is giving away the store to them. So the city of Kalamazoo has given them what, 21 million in recent years in tax breaks?
There's been at least 3 different rounds of tax breaks from the city and county combined that I'm aware of. The last set of tax breaks, the city did put the brakes on it after giving away about half of what they promised. But they've still, like you said, they're still giving tens of millions of dollars of tax breaks.
Because we all were calling in complaining about health issues. That's the only way they were. Yeah. And we had someone we had Dr. White from the White House Environmental Justice Council call in that meeting and say that the city of Kalamazoo is a disgrace to the United States of America for even allowing that was for the benefits agreement. They tried to do this benefits agreement and said they would give us $60,000 only, Graphic Packaging would, and do a job fair instead of trying to relocate people, trying to fix their gas leaks. And even though, the wastewater plant has these sensors saying that everything's not as bad over there, I just don't trust any of the sensors. I don't trust the sensors at Graphic Packaging. They're supposed to be publicized. I don't trust anything that the government does because they've allowed this to happen for so many years. And it seems like health.
Well, the bottom line is, like in East Palestine, like in Flint, you got to trust how you feel, People aren't
Yeah.
having their eyes burned for no reason. They're not
Exactly.
choking. You don't have high levels of asthma for no reason. So
And headaches and stomach aches and everything.
And can I ask you, because I do think, David, this obviously begins as an issue of environmental racism. I don't even like saying environmental racism. I just call it racism. But it's coming to the where the whites live. Are people in your community starting to get more upset about this, informed about this? Talk about the reaction there. And could you just tell people around where you live so we know also
I
kind
live
of
in
how
one
far?
of the what they call the core neighborhoods. So it's one of the neighborhoods that essentially shares a border with downtown on the west side of the city. Yeah, and it's just like every place else in the country and anywhere in the northern hemisphere. If you it's the reason that we live in a rural area mostly. You always use the example of every barn in North America leans to the east. It's because the prevailing winds blow that direction. So usually living on the west side of town, you're not going to get the pollution from the industrial districts that are all on the east side. So that just tells you how bad it is, that it's going upwind at this point. And people in my neighborhood are, shocked because it's never been something that they contend with. And this is one of the problems that happens with racism of any sort. Allowing damages to happen to somebody else is just opening the door for it to happen to yourself. If you're that selfish, if you're not even worried about other people, it's just making it easier for you to be hurt too, instead of having that solidarity. But a couple of my neighbors, one is really concerned because she has to drop her kid off at school. And every time she drops her kid off at school, she has to make a decision if she thinks it's safe for her kid to get out of the car. It's that bad. Another one of my neighbors, his daughter has breathing issues to start with. And, I live in a neighborhood with all old houses, and a lot of them don't have air conditioning, and the smell seeps into his house year round. I have a window unit I cool my house with in the summertime. Am I going to not be able to open my windows this year because the smell is just so bad? And that smell is not just a smell; it's this toxin. I mean, it's terrible.
Right. And also, Colin, if you could show this, I mean, Kalamazoo has an F rating from what is that? Ozone, that measures air quality across America. So, I mean, that's pretty bad if you have an F rating.
Those health reports that you said that were from 2017 and there isn't any more up there anymore? They took that one down too. I've had that one saved for a couple of years. That's not up there anymore. They didn't want people to know that our chronic lower respiratory disease is higher than the United States. So they took it down once I started raising alarm bells.
Well, on top of that, Brandon, or I keep calling it Brandon. I don't know why. Sorry, Jordan. Not just the air health, but it's also the University of Michigan study that identifies Kalamazoo as one of the worst environmental justice hotspots in the state. And that is directly attributed to graphic packaging. Yeah.
And the hydrogen sulfide that's been monitored since 2019. But I found out through a FOIA request. Why didn't they tell us? Wouldn't they tell us there's a toxic gas being monitored in the city? The city of Kalamazoo didn't even tell us. Yeah. They didn't tell us they did an odor study in 2009. They didn't tell us that they did an odor study in 2020. It wasn't until I found all that stuff that we even knew what the odor was, that it was toxic, and where it was coming from. That's one of the biggest problems I have with everybody is the lack of just public information to us to try to so we can try to save our own lives. And then the lack of just trying to even get their own public health expert. The city of Kalamazoo had one at one time and they repealed it in 2012 for what? You already had an odor study done a few years before that and you had tons of air complaints filed. Why would you get rid of your public health expert unless you have something to hide?
Right. And can we also show these emails? We've redacted some of it, so for the protection. But this is just some of your interaction with the Department of Environmental Great Lakes, which they renamed from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. That was part of their rebrand after they poisoned Flint and covered it up. So this is the Michigan Environmental Department. And they have been talking with you, Brandy, and I guess playing down the smells and odors in Michigan or coming from graphic packaging. So this Monica official says, I'm not denying the complainant's experiences. It is possible that the wind characteristics may have changed by the time I arrived to investigate. I was in Kalamazoo and investigating both areas, West Main Hill and North Side, for about an hour. And during this hour, I only experienced faint and infrequent odors in the North Side neighborhood. We have one more, if you have the other one, Colin. She said, thanks for sending the video. I received your PEAS complaint along with a couple other last evening and drove down to Kalamazoo to investigate. I arrived in the West Main Hill neighborhood about 7:30, but did not detect any odors upon arrival. Drove around the West Main Hill area for about 15 minutes, but still did not detect any odors in the area. I then drove to the North Side neighborhood and to all the locations you mentioned in your PEAS complaint. However, I observed only very faint wet cardboard GPI odors for very brief periods of time, blah, blah, blah. And you wrote back, I don't agree with your assessment. People are not calling me crying over faint odors. They are always worse late at night and on weekends. So something is up with that. So pretty unsurprising to me, because this is what I hate to keep bringing it back to Flint, but I bring up Flint because this is the same agency, the Michigan Environmental Department, the Michigan Health Department. And it's just a game of don't believe your lying eyes, don't believe your lying taste buds, your lying sinuses. And by the way,
lose it. She could lose her smell. Think how many times she probably goes to other facilities. She could have lost her sense of smell. And it doesn't matter. You have a scale. What is it? 1 to 5, David? Faint to like the strong odor. Like,
but also any chemical engineer will tell you they're releasing different quantities at different times of the day. So she said, and by the way, what's faint to you could be an asthmatic reaction to somebody else. But I know that's been Brandy's experience, but David, correct me if I'm wrong, you serve on some form of local committee there. Have you had any interactions with the state health environmental department? Have they jerked you around? What about local officials?
So on the Eagle people came to one of our ECC meetings about 3 months ago.
Let's make this digestible. Eagle is the state environmental department, and and what's the ECC?
Environmental Concerns Committee.
Okay, go on.
City of Kalamazoo. Yeah.
Yep. So they came and gave a presentation to the committee about what Eagle's doing, what they've monitored, what they've found. And there's no way to say it other than it was political speak. It was nothing was said. They talked for an hour. The meeting is available on YouTube, on the city's YouTube channel. You can watch it. You can look for yourself and make your own decisions. But there was nothing said. It was all, oh, we don't have this data. We don't have that data. Well, that sensor's too expensive. Oh, we can't get that sensor. We don't have the legal authority to do that. And it was just nothing said. So
with
yeah,
the
they came,
Department
they
of Health
talked to
Human
us.
Services when they came.
So they have the legal authority to give this corporate polluter $21 million in tax breaks, but not the legal authority to measure what they're actually emitting into the air.
They're a joke.
Well, so the facility is zoned M2, which is the type of manufacturing zoning that is the most permissive. So the city has given them as much of a green light as they legally can already. Now that's where it starts. But then you're right, Brent. I don't know why I keep that. Sorry, Jordan. You're right. If the city has the authority to say yes or no, to whether or not they can do this expansion, if the city has the authority to grant them permits or not grant them permits, if the city has the authority to allow them to use its infrastructure or not, then the city has the authority to regulate this facility. It's just a matter of whether or not it's going to do so. And it's shown for 20 years, people have been complaining about this particular facility. As Brandy's right, the other facilities in that space before, but for 20 years, people have been complaining about this business in that spot, and it's not gotten better.
And let me say something about David. You know how you said how graphic packaging got there in 1908? Let me do a little backstory. Graphic packaging has just been the same company, just under different names. Graphic packaging is Coors. So anybody out there that buys Coors beer, switch up. Because I
Coors
have an
beer
article.
sucks anyway, to be honest. But
right,
yeah.
I have an article. It's just it's graphic packaging is a subsidiary of Coors. They started in Kalamazoo as Coors, and they changed their name and bought more companies and changed their name and bought more companies and changed their name. And I found an article from 1984 from the CEO of Coors, and their grandsons are on the graphic packaging board of directors from Coors. It says it right on Linked, that African Americans should be lucky that they were brought over here in chains, that they were brought to the United States, and that they are not intellectual. They said it at a Denver business meeting.
Jesus.
Coors has a bad record with civil rights, with women's rights, with LGBT. They've been boycotted on and off pretty much consistently since the 50s.
Yeah.
Right. So let me ask you, I mean, I'm not a stranger to corporate villains and government basically being bought off by corporations, but in this case, is graphic packaging like such a super duper big, awesome job creator in Kalamazoo that we must do nothing and allow them to just poison the whole community? I mean,
it's like 500 jobs, but there's 77,
I mean, what's in it for the state?
people.
What's really in it for the state of Michigan? Because they greenlit this bond deal of $125 million. Obviously, Kalamazoo, I assume graphic packaging is one of the bigger employers if Kalamazoo is just giving tax breaks away. But obviously, the government officials doing this do not live in this community, because it's like sending soldiers away. The government will send soldiers to go fight in wars because they don't have to do it. Same principle here. But like, you would think, why don't they actually want to regulate graphic packaging? Is it graphic packaging is donating heavily to the politicians? Are they such a massive job creator? Because something's not adding up that they would just let a known polluter get away with this. Because there is long-term implications for the state, like, extra healthcare burdens because the residents are sick, and other things.
They're taking away school funds and taxpayer funds, and they're giving it to graphic packaging. Let's not forget that the taxpayers are actually paying for this to happen. The schools that need funding it's being given to graphic packaging. Like this is money they're taking from everybody else. Do you think anybody that pays taxes wants to see people get poisoned to death?
Right, but theoretically, obviously, I don't really believe this, but Democrat Gretchen Whitmer comes in. She says, "I'm going to fix the damn roads," and the Republicans are evil. By the branding, the Democrats are supposed to be going against these corporate polluters. Why would the Democrats, who now control Michigan's Congress and obviously the governorship, what does graphic packaging have something over them? I'm not understanding. This is not ExxonMobil.
I know, right?
This is not Disney World. It's the company's been around for a long time, but it's not like a Fortune. They're part of the Fortune 500, like David said. They're $1 billion corporation.
Yeah,
so
they bring in,
corporations can afford to pay off politicians and pay off.
Yeah, it's a couple $1 billion of revenue per year for this company. It is the biggest cardboard company in the country. It's huge. Jobs is not, there's this term in public relations called paltering. Graphic packaging is great. It's like it's the soft lie. It's telling part of the truth so that you distract from the things you don't want people to listen to.
Exactly.
They talk about the jobs that they offer, but if you look at the record, you look at what people have said in all the data, that's a really high turnover rate. And people, it's not a high quality job, despite all of the environmental violations that graphic packaging is racked up. They're also racking up almost as much in workplace health and safety violations. So, they employ a lot of people and they make a lot of hires, but nobody stays.
Nope. They have a big roach problem. I've heard from people that work there, like they have roaches, and then the odor inside the building just as bad as on the outside. I hate the word odor. Let's just call it what it is: toxic gas. Yeah. The toxic gases are bad inside and outside. I don't know why the state just I think the state just focuses on odor so much instead of saying toxic gas, because they don't want people to catch on. Like David said, they try to cover it up with that odor thing. This odor task force seems like a cover up to me, because why is Monica Brothers, who works for Eagle, attending private meetings that the public is not allowed to see or attend with the polluters and the politicians?
And obviously, we first thought with the toxic smoke coming out is asthma, respiratory issues, but there's other things too. I mean, it could cause heart problems, cancers, autoimmune problems. I mean, a full cognitive issues,
kidney disease.
So could you talk about, because, last time, the couple times we spoke, Brandy, you kind of kept it real and said there's not a ton of activism because folks are kind of just hopeless about the situation. Is that improving now that, more people are becoming aware? It's unfortunately that seems the toxins are spreading. So another community might be getting involved. What could be done? Because obviously it's not East Palestine in the sense of like an acute explosion. But there's Kalamazoos all over this country. I mean, I have people constantly messaging me about toxic mining next to them, fracking.
It's the fear. It's the fear too, because of Kalamazoo is really like one of the most racist cities in the United States. They had a racial profiling study where they just pull over people because they're Black and they send them to jail. They have one of the highest rates of institutionalizing Black men, especially say you have a white man that does robbery and you give him 5 years, you're giving the Black man 30 years to life. Right. They don't want, people don't want to speak out because they're already targeted by the city of Kalamazoo police and the county prosecutors. So you're going to be afraid if you're Black when you've been continuously targeted by the city of Kalamazoo for years and years and years. And, I mean, I'd be scared too. That's why I feel like, the few of us like me and David and his wife and everybody else that's speaking out. And there are people from the neighborhood that speak out too, that are African-American. I'm not saying that they aren't, but also there's people still in the neighborhood that are unaware what's going on because they don't watch the news. I just talked to somebody, one of my friends, like a couple of weeks ago, and he goes, I didn't even know. I didn't even know this whole time that this was going on because we're so busy working and with our daily lives, we don't watch the news because it's so political. And so like half the city's not sending out flyers. Hey, we got some toxic gas. They're not sending stuff in the mail to everybody. Like when they do their little water testing, they send that in the mail. Our water's okay. It's not, but they send all that stuff to everyone in the mail. But they don't send anything in the mail to anyone letting them know that they're being poisoned by toxic gas in the air, or that there's spills into the river from graphic packaging. They'll put it on their Facebook page. Does everybody have Facebook? No. I mean, it's like the lack of public notification with the local and state and federal government is disgusting. It's like disgusting.
And could you talk about, because your reference in the email to the environmental official who was gaslighting you, oh, it's a faint odor or whatever. You referenced people aren't crying crying over a faint odor. So can you kind of, bring us the human element here of people you're speaking to there and what are they going through? And we heard about Deanne and her unfortunate loss. Are there other people that?
There's so many people. I mean, there's an elementary school, Lincoln Elementary School, around the corner from graphic packaging, and they don't even let the kids go out for recess because the pollution is so bad. I've talked to I went door to door. That's why I filed the class action lawsuit after I got that FOIA request, because after I went door to door, I found out everybody had asthma like me, or COPD, or worse, or cancer. And I found out, like, in the 70s, when graphic packaging was under a different name, I think it was James River at that time, that there was a cancer cluster on North Edward Street, and they paid people off. I mean, that's what I heard. And I guess some of the people didn't even get the money because they had lack of education of, some people told me it was at the city. They never got the money. I don't even know why it would be at the city if it's coming from a company too. So I just feel like they're all in cahoots with each other. It's like a good old boys club. They protect each other instead of protecting the health of residents. And all the residents have, like, I have lists and lists and lists of people with cancer, asthma, COPD, emphysema, heart disease, kidney disease. I mean, the kids dying from asthma attacks, the babies dying because they can't breathe. So many people undiagnosed. And that's why it's so important, and David knows this, that Michigan Department of Health and Human Services released their health recommendations immediately. They have had plenty of evidence. I hired my own toxicologist to write a report in 2020 that initiated this health study to begin with. And he said in his toxicology report, just from looking at 2 gas studies without even seeing any other monitoring, that there is a severe health risk to this community and the employees at both graphic packaging and the wastewater plant. Then you have an epidemiologist saying we have the highest asthma rate in the region, asthma hospitalization, where you're actually being hospitalized for asthma. And so they know this, but they have delayed it 3 times already. They just don't want everyone to know the truth. And like I said in the last time I talked to you, to me, it's a conflict of interest. If you go to court and you're married, you don't have to testify against each other. Why is the manager of the tox program at Michigan Department of Health and Human Services married to the deputy director of Environmental Great Lakes and Energy? Why would somebody who's in charge of releasing a health report be married to the person who's in charge of regulating a company who's poisoning an entire freaking city?
One of the problems why people aren't doing anything, well, I don't want to say that, why people aren't organizing and taking action, is that Kalamazoo has a billionaire problem.
Yep.
We've got 4 billionaire families in this small Midwestern town. And because of that, one of the things that leads to is we have a really severe nonprofit industrial complex in Kalamazoo. A lot of people in this town are employed by one type of nonprofit or another, and they all go to the same foundations for their funding. And
is the Mott Foundation one of them?
What's that?
Is the Mott Foundation one of them?
No, local foundations. We have a wealth of local foundations that give out a ton of money that keep all of these different local nonprofits going. Right. And they can't say anything because I have witnessed, not just heard through, I've witnessed people be intimidated by politicians threatening to take away their ability to get foundation money if they didn't support the right political candidate or if they spoke up against issues that the city didn't want people speaking.
They're bullies.
Yeah.
Even the NAACP can't help. It's ridiculous.
Where do things stand? Because I know there's been lawsuits, civil suits, civil rights complaints. I know, Brandy, you have filed many complaints and, have some legal things going on. Where do things stand? Because obviously it did not happen overnight that graphic packaging has been given carte blanche to pollute the community. So it's not going to change overnight. But can you tell the audience, what are some of the, things in the fire, so to speak, right now?
Civil rights complaint against the city. I don't want to talk about that right now.
Okay.
The civil rights complaint against Environmental Great Lakes and Energy is in the final resolution process right now. The class action lawsuit is still in court, and we're about to file a few more lawsuits as well.
What keeps you going, just from a human? What keeps you going from a human standpoint, Brandy? I know that all of this forced you to move out of Kalamazoo, but I've dealt with a lot of folks that I don't judge them either. kind of gave
because
up.
I have empathy, because I have compassion, and because I love everybody, and I don't want to see anyone get poisoned. And I don't understand how any of these people sleep at night. How some of these people don't eat, that some of these people don't even care about their own families getting poisoned. It's disgusting. Like, I just do not understand. As money, like David said, these are billionaires around here. So how many people have been paid off to just look the other way? You can sleep at night being paid off, knowing that your family's getting poisoned, that you won't speak up as a city commissioner? All the city commissioners should be speaking up, not just the ones that are sick. All these people should not be making decisions that are like killing people, making people sick. If you can't make a decision that's going to protect somebody, if you can't, you're under oath as a duty, as a commissioner, a city commissioner, to do your job to protect the residents and to help the residents in the city of Kalamazoo. If you don't feel like you can do that, you shouldn't run. And people need to vote more. This is another example of why people need to vote. People think because, I think our mayor, he shouldn't even be mayor. There's 77,000 people in the city of Kalamazoo. Only 6,000 people voted.
Wow.
And I blame him majority, a lot of what's going on. David Anderson, he's evil to me. I handed him a toxicology report, like in his actual hand. And he looked at me with like an evil face, like he didn't even care. Like, all these people do not care. Every single time that anybody has talked or went to an Eagle public hearing and spoke about this, or a city commission meeting and spoke about this, people calling you with trachs in their throats, they look cold, evil. They don't even really respond to people calling in or standing up at the podium of now that go in person. They don't even acknowledge it. It's so weird how they even do their meetings. They'll have everyone make comments, and then at the end they'll talk about everything. And it's like, you should be addressing each person like they're a human being, like you care that they're getting sick, that you care that they are worried about their kids being harmed by pollution. You should be addressing each individual like a human being. There is no compassion. It's inhumane. Every single governmental official involved in this are inhumane. It just shows how evil this world is. And it definitely did start from racism. Like David said, they didn't really think about the consequences of environmental racism and how it's actually going to hurt everybody, not just them, and how much it really hurts the government. Use your freaking brain, man. You're giving all these millions and billions of dollars to all these corporations, taxpayer funds, school funds, for what? You could be using that money. We wouldn't even have we have a huge homeless problem in Kalamazoo too. Why are you billionaires not helping these homeless people get off the street? Why are you billionaires not relocating people that don't want to live next to the pollution? Why are you not giving people money? You should just be giving everybody the value of their homes right now so they can get the fuck out of there. Excuse my language, but I'm just saying, like, this is ridiculous. How can you have all this money and not do anything? Like, how can you not do anything?
And that's the other question, not question, but that's the other point. I see it in the comments, and it's not nobody. I don't think most people mean anything harmful by it, but people say, get out of there. Well, it's not so easy.
They can't afford to.
It's not so easy if you're poor. Honestly, it's not so easy.
Or your houses are devalued because you're a predominantly African-American community. Some of the white people can move, but also we are in a housing crisis. Just even if David has a nice house and lives in a nice neighborhood, but what if he sold his house? How does he know that he could find something right away? We're in a housing crisis too.
But also, why should we have to move?
Yeah,
you shouldn't have to.
Who gives them a right to poison our air so we have to go someplace else?
Right.
Absolutely.
He's a professor. He shouldn't have to leave his job, his home. Like, no, none of us. My ex-husband, he grew up in that neighborhood. Like, he didn't want to leave. It traumatized him to leave his family like that. He didn't. I was fine with leaving because. I was fine with that because I wanted to get away. I already had asthma. And I swear, as soon as I moved out to the country, literally, my lungs improved 5%. But they got so damaged from living there that my doctor said, and it made me cry so hard, that they won't get better because I was around all that. Then my lungs aren't going to get any better. But she said one thing is they're not going to get any worse.
Right.
So That's why everybody needs to get either graphic packaging needs shut down. That's what needs to happen. Start shutting down the polluters that don't want to follow regulations, especially billion-dollar corporations that can afford to put in pollution prevention, can afford to actually fix all their equipment, their malfunctioning equipment. You know, I had to complain so bad just for them to put fixing their malfunctioning equipment in the permit, which should have been denied.
My last question, because I got to go take care of the newborn, but is there media that exists in the state of Michigan? I mean, I haven't seen one in a couple of years because they kind of stopped covering Flint and regurgitated the bullshit that the water's fine there. But aside from a couple articles that just kind of give updates on lawsuits and civil rights complaints, does media exist? Do they ever like go to this area and smell it? Is there any investigation? Detroit Free Press, Detroit News, local
Free Press did one.
Local Kalamazoo, if they have media, because you would think this is a perfect story. If you're a real journalist, you got corporate greed, corruption, the state merged with corporation, environmental racism, health problems. I mean, there's a lot of elements here for journalists, but I kind of follow Michigan. I kind of follow Michigan media just because I stay on Flint. And I don't see that much on this story.
Yeah, there's been a few things, like Detroit Time Magazine did an interview with me, and then Aaron Brockovich did, and David's been interviewed. I've been interviewed by MLive and WWMT, which is like our local TV station. But this is a crisis. You guys need to be reporting this stuff every single week.
That's what I'm asking. I'm not talking about an interview.
They've done a few things here and there. You know, people have done things. No, it's not being continuous report. And I think a lot of it is because, you know, we have a good reporter that I feel like has done a really good job. Brad Devereaux from MLive has, but he also has bosses. So I don't think that, you know, if he had a choice, I think he would report about it every single day, honestly. But not every reporter gives a shit. They don't care, and they think that people, if they move there, they deserve to live. They deserve to live there because they don't understand that these people, a lot of people, they've lived there their whole lives. These are houses that have been passed down through generations. It's not like, you know, and then most of us, even in small towns, like I grew up in Dowagiac and we had factories, but none of us knew, like I told you last time, we didn't know that factories poisoned us. You know, we didn't know. None of us knew. This is a lack of education. I had to educate myself on all of this stuff for almost 3 years. I had to study. I had to talk to doctors. And University of Michigan doctor just came out, what was it, Dave, a couple of months ago, saying that the hydrogen sulfide levels that are being monitored by the city right now are like 40 times the minimal health risk right now. Like, he at least admitted it, but Michigan Department of Health and Human Services isn't coming out. They're downplaying it. They know that if people already have asthma and COPD, even if you don't have a respiratory disease, you're still going to get sick. Dave gets headaches when he walks his dog. People get stomach aches, headaches in his neighborhood. And then everybody in the environmental justice community is having constant asthma attacks. People at the businesses are having asthma attacks in their drive-through that are surrounding the environmental justice community. They're having headaches at work. There's a guy I talked to losing hair at work and had to get glasses from the burning eyes. I mean, the stories are just terrifying. This is literally, like, to me, I feel like I would never downplay the Flint water crisis, but I think this is worse because it's still going on. At least when Flint happened, they switched the water over. I still feel like they didn't do enough for Flint water crisis. I mean, that was like a shit show, and it still is because the people are still not being, you know, compensated for the harms that have been done to them. And I don't understand too why, if everybody has liability insurance, like even graphic packaging, why are you still fighting our lawsuit? Why are you not helping people? You have liability insurance. It's not, you have $7 million you use just to pay off fines. So why is Eagle only giving you $100,000 fine? You're a $1 billion corporation. And David talks about them making billions of dollars a year. Since the expansion started, they're making billions of dollars a quarter because we're the #1 plant that they have in the United States, maybe the whole world, because they have some in other countries, but they're located in environmental justice communities, predominantly African-American communities, all over the United States. And they've been in the top 10 toxic air and water polluters for years. University of Massachusetts does this study every single year for years. Top 10 worst water and air polluters. They're just bad guys. They're just bad guys, you know? They're just really, really bad guys. And I just like, why are they being protected by the government? Who are they? Who are they? Like, they're better than us. Like, there's more of us that everyone needs to wake up. Wake up,
I think
man.
the more people follow the money, the more we'll find out while they're being protected by the government. Because I'm sure they are showering the government either directly or through subsidiaries with a lot of money. David, any closing thoughts? I'm actually going to be going back to Flint next month for the 9-year anniversary to do some continuing follow-up reporting. So I'm probably going to take a trip to Kalamazoo while I'm there to cover this in person. But what would you like people to know before we wrap up?
This and Flint are both environmental health disasters. You know, East Palestine is environmental health disaster. They're becoming so common, we're losing our ability to focus on them. Mm-hmm. And what's different here is that this is the slow burn. You know, this is just every day. There's no new spill. I mean, there's a new spill here, a new spill there, you know, but it's all just on and on and on every day. And it just beats people down. I mean, how do you stay on top of something that's 20 years, 30 years going on? You know, not that it's easy to organize when there's an immediate crisis, but at least there's an emotional drive to do something now and meaningful. It's so hard to get people to do something when it's just been like this for 30 years, but it's getting worse all the time.
And now we know.
And you mentioned media, George. It gets some coverage here locally, not enough. Usually when there's some new tax break or some new, you know, spill or something, but it doesn't get out of Kalamazoo much. So, you know, anything you can do, what you're doing now, this is, you know, I know, you know, we're not on, you know, CNN right now, but, you know, we do have, which is part of the reason we can have this conversation. But you have an audience and we need people to pay attention. We need people's help. We need, I mean, you see people organizing in other communities for stuff like this. We just can't get people over the years and decades of being beaten down. So we just need a spark. We need somebody to help us get this thing going. You know, so many people have tried and work on it, but you know, we're just
stuck with the billion because we're surrounded by billionaires that don't give a fuck. And that's another thing. Yeah.
I think the common thread in all of this, because every story is different. Some are more acute, like a water switch or a train derailment. Some are the slow burn, like you're talking about. But at the end of the day, it's all connected, because whether you live in Kalamazoo or not, Flint or not, East Palestine or not, we're all Kalamazoo, really. I mean, where I live, where I grew up, there were corporate polluters. There could be a train derailment near you or reckless decisions, whether it's about the water or the air or fracking or you name it. You could all become contaminated either acutely or a corporation. There might be a corporation contaminating your community that you have no idea about. We haven't even gotten to landfills, which is a whole nother contamination point, where they other places where they store nuclear waste. I mean, this is a very beautiful country, but it's also in the industrialized boom, in the industrialized revolution, there wasn't a lot of thought to the long term of how this, corporate industrialization would have an effect. And the chickens are coming home to roost. So, and I think the stories like Kalamazoo are very important to cover because it's not as flashy, because there wasn't that initial explosion, but it's important because sickness is sickness and dying is dying, and you have people getting sick and dying.
No more expansions. I mean, literally, like we had 500,000 tons of pollution coming out every year from graphic packaging when I lived there. Now, February 2022, they added 700,000 more tons. Most people that live around factories don't have 1.2 million tons of pollution coming out, spilling out into a valley that traps it. You know, that's the problem. Everyone's being gassed to death. They're being gassed to death. This is literally like seriously sickening and frightening. And everyone needs help. If anybody out there, can you please call Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and tell them to give us some health recommendations, bring in some vans, bring in some doctors, if they can help, if these billionaires out there, I'm sure you're going to watch this. Why don't you start helping us and help everyone in Kalamazoo, give them some money to leave if they want to, or stop supporting corporations because they're poisoning the entire city now. So just stop supporting it. Stop giving tax breaks. Stop. Back before we didn't know. Now we do know. There's no reason for this to be happening because Environmental Great Lakes and Energy, the governor, the attorney general, everybody knows that pollution is bad now. It's 2023. Maybe in the 90s they didn't know how bad it was, but there's no excuse for this now. There's no excuse to give hundreds of millions of dollars to a corporation to poison people. This is a freaking horror movie. This is worse than any horror movie I've ever watched before.
Right. Is there anywhere people could go to get more information about this? I mean, obviously I'll stay on it, but is there Facebook groups or websites or anything?
No, we probably should start a Facebook group, but I still think like I said, like David said, I mean, everybody that's tried to do this has been kept quiet. Everybody's like, everyone's in fear. I mean, I've posted stuff on Facebook and I got my post taken down, and it's like, is Facebook in cahoots with graphic packaging? I mean, I know graphic packaging is connected to other corporations like Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola. Everybody can start calling those corporations and tell them to stop doing business with graphic packaging. Then maybe they will shut down because they won't have any customers. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like they do lids now. I went to Jimmy John's and I got a lid on my water, and I'm like, it said graphic packaging. I was like, I thought they just do paper. Now they're making lids and stuff. Like, just stop supporting people that are evil. This is an evil corporation. This is a racist corporation starting from so many years ago. This is not nothing new. There isn't anybody on the board of directors that's African American. There's anybody that's these politicians.
Absolutely.
Well,
I've had a lot of fuckers try to shut me down, and they haven't succeeded yet. So at the very least, I will be in Michigan next month, and definitely want to cover this in person. It's one thing to talk to folks from far away, but as a journalist, there's no substitute for being on the ground and seeing, smelling everything that's going on. I got asthma already, probably from all the toxic dumps I've been, but I'll definitely try to be there. Thank you guys for taking the time. We'll cut this up into a separate thing. If you live in Michigan, Governor Whitmer has a number. Governor Whitmer has a number.
Call the governor too.
Attorney General Dana Nessel has a number. She's totally fucked up the Flint investigation, but if there are laws that she's in charge of there, I think laws are being broken too.
I called the Attorney General's office, and they said we represent Eagle. You represent the public. We're the ones that elected you.
Yeah, it's kind of a conflict with the Attorney General's office because they're supposed to defend the state, but then prosecute the state if the state does wrong. Ask the people of Flint how that conflict wall that they have over there did. Listen, Republicans are bad, but the Democrats are in charge there, and they're allowing this, it seems, due to fidelity to corporations. I mean, there's no other way of putting it. So, and like you said, it's not just graphic packaging because they're connected to Coors and other entities. So we'll stay on this. Thank you guys for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
And, before I end, listen, I want to cover and we want to cover as much as humanly possible. We're a small outlet. We do not have the resources of CNN or the New York Times, but with the resources we have, we try to cover as much as possible, including on the ground. Lewis was just in East Palestine twice. We're trying to send him back soon. When I go to Flint next month, it'll be my, let me count this, 19th, count it, 19 reporting trip to Flint since 2016. So that's 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 7 years, almost 20 trips. I'm not saying that, you know, to send me flowers. I'm saying it because to actually stay on these stories and keep it in the news at all, it requires being in the trenches. It requires being on the ground, building relationships with residents, with local, with people who have been affected locally. It requires keeping in touch with these residents. If you notice, I've interviewed Brandy at least 4 or 5 times now on Kalamazoo, and it's my first time talking to David. But we need your help. We need your help to cover these things, both on the ground and from afar. You definitely need more than me. I'm so grateful that we've gotten enough member signups to continue sending Lewis on the ground. I would love to expand Lewis's role here, so Lewis could almost be like, you know, my co-pilot if it works out. Because believe it or not, I've never wanted to be the only face here. If Status Coup is going to grow and succeed, we need more than just I. We're going to need other reporters and other faces and other voices than just me. But we need your help. So if you're not yet a Status Coup member, please, please, please sign up. StatusCoup.com/join. You're seeing where your money is going. You're seeing exactly where your money is going. That's to on-the-ground reporting, investigative reporting that matters. We might not be able to throw every corporate criminal in jail. We might not be able to save every single person from getting sick or poisoned, but we can lift people's voices that do not have a voice through CNN, that are not going to get invited on CNN or MSNBC or get quoted in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Associated Press or PBS or the broadcast networks. And the more people's voices you get out there, the more attention we get on these stories, the more we're able to wake up the masses to what's really going on. Because you cannot have activism without consciousness. You cannot have people taking action if people don't know. So that is the purpose here, to wake more people up and to have a journalistic status coup of the status quo, because we cannot continue in this status quo indefinitely. From East Palestine to Flint to Kalamazoo to name your place, people are going to continue getting sick and die. So please sign up if you can, StatusCoup.com/join. I don't know if we got any members while I was live, but thank you to the Gina just signed up. So Gina, thank you. We got another member through YouTube, but we need more. And sign up for free to our Substack. Sign up for free to our Substack. We do have a paid option on Substack too, but you can sign up for free. That way you get our investigative stories and updates when we're going live straight to your email inbox. So sign up to our Substack for free. That's statuscoup.substack.com, statuscoup.substack.com. Let me read any super chats I missed here. Thank you, Small Town Guy, $50. Holy cow. Night of Hope, East Palestine Auditorium, March 28th. So that's tomorrow at 6:30 Eastern at night. So that is another town hall that's going on in East Palestine tomorrow night. So that's the Night of Hope, East Palestine Auditorium, March 28th, 6:30 at night. Your concern is not going unnoticed and is very appreciated. Thank you, Small Town Guy, for that kind comment. Tony D, $2, said that a shooting isn't headline news. I saw it on the news earlier. I'm sure they'll cover it for a day, maybe 2, and then move on, as they always do. Das Bus flies, 11.99 euros. German trains have a system which causes the train to stop if a button isn't pushed regularly. Why am I not surprised this decades-old system isn't present in at least some American trains? Because the trains run our government. That's why. Yakuza Chris, $2. Falcon Pipeline, poison the land, then get it cheap. Timothy McDermott, 1999. Thank you for staying on this story, Jordan. Absolutely. Thanks for the kind super chat. Timothy again, 1999. To poison the public. That is what's going on. Yakazu Chris, $2. Again, Falcon Pipeline, poisoning for cheap land. Carpe Diem, $5. Trolls keep showing up claiming this disaster is a land grab. That's garbage. A corporation could legally seize any private land via eminent domain. I don't think it's a land grab because if it's a land grab, they're doing it to push the poor people out and gentrify it and bring in wealthy people. And I'm pretty sure wealthy people don't want to live in a toxic petrochemical cesspool, because a lot of these chemicals will be very hard to particularly dioxins, to take out of the environment. So I'm not sure it's a land grab. Sue signed up as a new YouTube member. Thank you so much, Sue. Very much appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Again, we still have, I think, 1 or 2 videos from Lewis's last on-the-ground trip to East Palestine. So we'll be posting those as we go. If you haven't watched any of our other, not live streams, but our shorter videos, make sure you go watch those videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you back here tomorrow night, 5 o'clock Eastern. Have a good night.